I'll start talking in a minute, folks. I'm just waiting for a few people to log on. I'm sure it won't take you long to see the stream. If you've seen the preview I gave earlier, you'll know what tonight's stream is all about. Anybody out there who's a big Sega fan, this one will be of interest to you. So, just going to give it a second for a few people to log on to the video, and we'll check out what's going on. I'm sure some of you are familiar with these scenes. Some of you might own it, some of you might own one of them, some of you might own two, some of you might own the trio. So there's a few of you logging on now, so I'm going to switch over and we will begin talking. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another YamYam Retro Gaming live stream. And as the title says, today we're looking at the Sega Ultra Megazord, as I like to call it. How's it going, Scott? You alright? How's it going? Dave, nice to see you there. Ryan, I know you just logged in. There's a few other people appearing there. Fair play to you. Thanks for joining the stream. So, yeah, hope you've all been well. Been a mad couple of weeks. I hope you've been catching up on my streams, and if you've just started following my videos, go back and take a look at some of the ones I've done in the last couple of weeks. Just this week I've done 3 streams. I'm trying to catch up. We've done one on the Commodore 64, on the spontaneous one. We did one on the Vectrex the other night, and today it's a day earlier than I wanted to do, but we are covering the Sega Super Combo of the Mega Drive 2, the Mega CD 2, and the 32X. So a few more of you joining in now. So yeah, I'll begin my bull. So anyway, any child of the 90s, any child of the 80s basically, anyone who grew up gaming in the 90s, in the teens, everybody knows that Sega were probably one of the hottest contenders for, you know, game maker and console maker of the generation. They were there from the 3rd generation upwards, and from mid-80s right up until the towards the end of the 90s. They had a decade of storming hits. You know, they'd already been dominating the arcades for a couple of years. They'd been famous for some of the conversions they did, and their youth marketing, you know, really pushed out their systems that they put out there to try and compete with Nintendo, who were absolutely slaying the market at the time. So everyone's aware of the Master System. That came first, 1986 or 7, I think it was, for the UK. And the Master System did really well over here at a time when we weren't adopting consoles. We were still messing about with 8-bit and early 16-bit home computers. The rest of the world was talking about ROM-based chips and ROM cartridges for home consoles. So one of the first tastes a lot of people got, the NES got massively overlooked because it was a bit more expensive over here, and Sega's Master System helped them kind of get an early footing in the market. And of course that led to the 4th generation arriving in about 1988-89, and Sega kicked in hard with the Sega Megadrive. The Sega Megadrive, of course, needs no introduction. It was, you know, one of the most popular systems of all time, one of the most highly rated, one of the best game libraries you'll find, and some of the most fondly remembered games, and probably Sega in their prime, you know, when the Mega Drive was out. How's it going, Kev? Thanks for joining the stream. So the Mega Drive was competing, you know, well. It arrived in 1990, I think, in the UK, finally. And, you know, it started well. It wasn't really competing with Nintendo at the time because, like I say, the NES didn't have a massive take-up. Master System had already established their footing. And the Super Nintendo was still a good 12-18 months off at that point. When the Super Nintendo did arrive, it got more serious competition because Super Nintendo, of course, was the only time that Nintendo kind of got ahead of the field for the generation. And at that point, you know, with all the extra cartridges, with the additional chips and the extra game capabilities the Super Nintendo had, the Mega Drive was going to struggle to keep up, and Sega knew that. So early on, they played the ace into the ring, or so they thought. And at the end of 1991, I believe, talk arrived of the Sega Mega CD. Now, obviously, what I'm showing you here is the later revisions. As time went on, you know, Sega, they had to cut costs, they had to compete in the market, and so they moved on. We began originally with the original Sega Mega Drive, and the Sega Mega CD originally arrived as a stackable unit that went underneath the console and had a sliding drawer mechanism, like most CD players of the time. It was a little bit unreliable on the old laser and drawer side, but you know, it's the more fondly remembered one that when people talk about the Mega CD. But as time went on, they started to slim down, and in the end, it got repackaged when the Mega Drive 2 arrived, with the Mega CD 2. I'm telling you, Justin, it's certainly getting expensive. I'll come on to that shortly. So the system itself, Mega Drive, of course, was absolutely storming at the time. The Mega Drive 2, not as good a model as the original model, I would say. Even though the original model didn't have stereo out via the output ports at the back, it did have a headphone socket on the front, and it is quite easy to mod to be able to output stereo through the rear port. They actually address that with the Model 2. You do get stereo output through the rear socket. However, there was some reports of, in the cost cutting to create the console, they cut some corners and the image isn't quite as clear. The sound clarity isn't quite as clear, even though you're getting stereo sound. And the Mega Drive 2 isn't favoured as well. However, as time went on and it became a bit of a beast, it was more evident that the Mega Drive 2 was becoming more widely adopted. And so when it came time for this to arrive, which was the 32X, they basically modelled it around the stylings and the profile of the Mega Drive 2 primarily. So what have we got here? We've got the Mega Drive 2, standard thing. We've got the console with its own power supply and the standard RF out or RCA out via the back. Then you've got the Mega CD 2, and this attaches to the console on the side edge of the Mega Drive here. There's a removable flap at the bottom, and you basically slide the Mega Drive onto this. The Mega CD 2 unit is this entire section here, including the base that goes underneath, and the Mega Drive 2 just kind of slots into a slot on top, and slides over and clicks into place and pushes onto the Mega CD 2 there via a side connector. All of the video processing and everything goes through the Mega Drive, so you still use the Mega Drive's aerial lead. However, at the rear, there is actually a left and right audio output. Because it was a CD player and CDs was still kind of advancing technology then and the way to go for music, they figured that people would want to use this as a CD player and output it to some kind of audio system, whether it be hi-fi separates or otherwise. So it had its own audio outputs at the back. This thing, unfortunately, also needed its own power supply. So that's two power supplies. And anybody who's ever seen a Sega power brick knows that the brick itself forms the plug. So it's a big, huge block thing. So you're already taking up too many sockets. So yeah, the Mega CD arrived in late 1991, 1992 over here, and about a year and a half later, I think the Mega CD 2 arrived in line with the Mega Drive 2. Then going on a little bit further, I believe it was 1995 at this point. Sega basically threw a shit fit. Let's face it, they made some massively bad corporate decisions. They were planning too many. There was already too many consoles at this point. I mean, the whole thing is on life support at this point, and all these expansions didn't really do enough still to compete with what the Super Nintendo was still doing using expandable chips into the cartridges themselves. So they persevered and they continued, and even though at this point the Saturn was announced and the 5th generation was getting ready to kick into swing in Japan, they brought out this, which is the 32X. The 32X is its own console, and whereas the Mega CD expanded it by adding CD functionality, so you could do things like FMV, which they kind of advertised as the future, and CD quality audio. The 32X decided to go in the different direction. It returned to cartridges, but they had a bigger capacity. They had additional processing chips. It had a decent Polygon processor in there, but it still had to work in conjunction with the Mega Drive. And in terms of audio capability, even though it could play slightly better samples and everything, it was still stifled by the number of channels, I believe, that the Mega Drive had. So it was a little bit strangled in that effect. Now, the reason these systems weren't widely adopted is, like I say, that the 4th generation was advancing, the 5th generation was already on its way, and Sega had just completely lost it at this point. They were gearing up for the Saturn, which was out probably before the 32X in Japan. It never became a budget option for a newer generation console for people who've got Mega Drives and just wanted to expand it. People were hedging their bets on the Saturn, and probably rightfully so. There were other better competitors coming, but if you're going to stick with Sega, why would you bother with this when you had the Saturn on its way, which really was next generation stuff and going to be competing with the likes of the PlayStation and the what was the Ultra 64 at the time. So it wasn't widely adopted. The cost of getting all 3 of these things was astronomical. I mean, you were probably looking at the time at about £100 to £140 for the Mega Drive 2. You were probably looking at about the same, up to about £180 for the Mega CD. And then you stick on the 32X as well. And I think at launch, over here in some places, it could be anything as much as £160 for that. You add all that up and you've got nearly £500 there worth of console kit. That didn't make any sense when you could, I remember from memory, the local independent shops around here, it's when they first started dabbling in imports and talking about grey imports. And at that point you could be pre-ordering yourself a PlayStation, pre-ordering yourself a Saturn from Japan, and you'd only be paying about £500. So why would you bother dumping your money on bits of kit like this? It just didn't make any sense. Whether the games were any good or not probably wouldn't have helped the system. It was just bad marketing, bad timing, and bad business decisions. Now, a lot of people talk about this system, and like everything on the internet, the perspective you get is unfortunately a very American one. That's the nature of the internet, sadly. It's talked about that these systems were no good. It was basically talked about the Mega CD was a piece of crap, the 32X was a piece of crap, not even worth wasting your time on. I don't feel that way. As much as my affinity at that time when I was a teenager lay with Nintendo right up until the 5th generation arrived, I knew that Sega, they had a strong market presence, they had good games, they had good support behind them from third parties, and they'd done a lot to gain ground on Nintendo. And I never saw it as a massive problem, and I wish more would have happened. Of course, with it being, the early 90s, we were just coming out of the 80s, we were coming out of recession, we were coming out of, the Tory, back end of the Tory years, and, people didn't have a lot of money, and as a kid, the whole video game craze that everyone thought would go away stuck, and it became firmly ingrained. We were probably the first generation to have it firmly ingrained into our upbringing. But the thing was, we couldn't afford to sustain what we would have liked to. I would have given anything to have owned every console back in the day, but it didn't work like that. I know a lot of you would have been like me. You'd have come from, pretty humble backgrounds. You'd have had to make a choice. You'd probably have had one of the 8-bit consoles, one of the 8-bit computers, maybe begged and pleaded and got yourself a computer, school-worthy computer such as an ST or an Amiga. If you were lucky, most of us, we were progressing on to the 16-bit consoles. You would have had to make a choice. You'd have had to stick your hand in one camp or another. You would have had to go with the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo, and whatever path you went down, you tended to continue down. So there was no way anybody who could only afford one home console was going to be able to shell out and buy all this extra kit just to get some, just to squeeze that last little bit of functionality out of the systems. And so they just didn't do well. Their distribution wasn't wide, the game support wasn't wide, and Sega were pushing everything into the Saturn. So it was just a sad thing that these items just kind of got lost in the past. So, I mean, I've got some indications of that in something I just happen to have here. So, my Mega CD, I did manage to pick this up. I'd already got a couple of Mega Drives, and I think it was about 2 years ago now, I was kind of doubling everything up, and I acquired some more things, and I managed to get a really good deal on the Mega Drive 2 and Mega CD 2 in full working order, because the lasers do go on these quite often, and so do the drive mechanisms. And I got a really good deal, and I got the pair, I think it was for 85 quid, which was a bargain even 2 years ago. I did take a plunge. It was on a random eBay listing that had crap pictures. The place looked like a bit of a dump, but I took a punt on it, took the risk, and it works perfectly, and I've got no complaints about it. It came with all the cables and everything, so happy about that. When it comes to the 32X, the 32X was expensive back in the day, and you can kind of see that by looking at this and where Sega were at the time. I bought this 32X boxed, and I bought it probably around the same time, about 2 years ago. And when I picked it up, it came with this box, which still shows exactly where they were. Now, these weren't... you can notice there's a sticker on the front here. It's not part of the box. It is a separate sticker, and it's not been added by a store. It's been put on by Sega themselves, or some kind of advertising thing. So you've got the system there. You can probably just about make out on this sticker here at the time. This looks like some kind of reduction sticker as it is, and the price on there was $134.99. So at some point this was out there, brand new, being reduced to £135, and these are obviously the first released versions of the console, because it's got this sticker on, which was trying to convince everybody just to buy it as it was. You could get up to £50 off 32X software. It was telling you to look out for these logos and that. And the reason that was there was because they knew there wasn't many games going to be out for it at release date, and they knew not many people were adopting it in the other regions. It had already been released in America and Japan, so they had to try and do something to kind of force you to buy this and buy it as a safe bet. And you can just see on the date there. It says at the bottom there. It says, cashback mailing offer closes 31st of March 1995. Game vouchers for 3 months from date of purchase. So this system would have been released around early 1995. At that point, like I say, the Saturn was definitely arriving on the doorsteps of a lot of people. I think some people already had it grey imports at that point. So they were trying to convince you to buy this by saying, look, we'll give you a load of games for free, or we'll give you discounts on a load of games. And that was they were already saying that was going to expire in March 1995. So, they weren't putting that offer out there very long. They were trying to get you to buy it and use it and buy the early games. And I can tell you that when I got this, the £50 offer wasn't there. There were a couple of receipts inside. Someone did take advantage, but that piece of paper got destroyed, unfortunately, so I can't remember what games it was for. And it obviously convinced somebody to buy it back in the day. But whether they paid this £135 or whether they got it even cheaper later on, I don't know, because this sticker's already partially obliterated when I got it. So, at the time you could see the 32X, you could see the number of console variations was just getting ridiculous. You can see there showing the 32X hooked up to a Megadrive 1. You can see it hooked up to a Megadrive 2. You can see it there hooked up to a Mega CD 2, which is exactly how I've got it here. And then you can see it there hooked up with the Model 1 with a Mega CD 1 as well. There's so many different combinations. There's a couple of variations he's in showing there, like having a Mega CD 1 attached to a Mega CD 2 with a 32X on the top. It was just so many combinations, it was stupid. It didn't make much sense. And at the time, you know, the games were advertising, not exactly overwhelming, you know. Okay, good strong start there. You can see Doom advertising at the top, and the port of Doom for the 32X is pretty good. Cosmic Carnage, very average fighter. Stellar Assault, nothing special. Trying to be Star Wars arcade, it's not. Metalhead, never played it, I'll be honest, some kind of mech game. Shadow of Atlantis, never played that either. Motocross Championship, typical racer. Star Wars Arcade, it is a good game, but it's nowhere near on par with the original Atari 1980 game, and it's not on par with the later 1996 Star Wars Arcade, you know, the one that had all the different stages and using analog control. And, you know, they're using a golf game to kind of advertise a console. It just seems they were kind of clutching at straws at this point. And Virtua Racing, I'll be honest, it's not that much far above the Megadrive Virtua Racing. It's got a few extra features, but, you know, technically it's not that much further above. So they were struggling at launch, and that just continued, unfortunately. Now, as well as the standard games, there were also a couple of CD 32X games where you had to get the CD-based game, and the CD-based games of certain games had very small FMV windows or limited soundtracks with the 32X capability to process the graphics, that you had like a larger kind of graphical window, smoother FMV with a lot more colours displayed on screen. Looked a bit cooler, but there was only a couple of those games released, and the games weren't much cop either. So anyway, that is a rundown of, I know it's taken a while to give you a rundown, but that is a rundown of the Mega Drive, the state of Sega at the time. It wasn't pleasant. It was sad to see for anybody who was a fan of Sega, and it's sad to look back now. You know, I wasn't the biggest Sega fan back in the day, but I did like the games on there, and it's a shame that it never worked out. Now, the problem with owning and playing these games today is the only real way to experience them properly is to get this setup. Now, this setup is, let's face it, it's an abomination, right? So you've got the Mega Drive, which uses its own power supply. You've got the Mega CD2, which uses its own power supply. You've got the 32X, which uses its own power supply. Add to that the 32X uses its own graphics processor. It can't use the Mega Drives. So what you've got round the back is an absolute nightmare of wires. I'm just going to try and turn this round and show you what we're looking at. So let's turn this round slowly, try not to disturb too much. So around the back we've got the Mega Drive there. We've got, I'll turn the light on here so you can see it. There we go. So we've got the Mega Drive. You can see it's plugged in to the Mega CD2 through an expansion port just up the gap there. You can just about make that out. And you've got the Mega CD2 itself, and there's the 32X. Now, the Mega Drive has got its own power supply there. The Mega CD has its own power supply there. And you can see there's a port for, I think that one was for headphones there. And then you've got the two RCA outs I talked about for the audio. And then the 32X has got its own power supply as well. Then you've got a jumper cable, which comes from the back of the Mega Drive, which forces the signal out of the Mega Drive into the 32X, then it gets processed in there, added with the graphics processor that's in there, and then you've got your AV out coming out of the 32X. So that is just a nightmare spiral of cables. You also had problems when it comes to connectivity. In theory, you could have used any Mega Drive, any Mega CD, and any 32X together. But connecting those all up was a problem. If you wanted to add the Model 1 to this, there was like an adapter plate that kind of fitted on the end to extend the width to be able to attach it, and it looked ridiculous. I think you could use the Mega CD 2 with the Mega Drive 2 with the Mega CD 1. Getting confused here because there's that many. But it also needed a weird adapter to go on it, and it was just a nightmare. And then when you start to throw the 32X into the mix, it got even more complex. Like I say, the 32X itself just plugs into the top of the Mega Drive here, right? It's like a big mushroom, and as standard, it was designed for the Mega CD, the Mega Drive 2. And the way it attaches is it just plugs in there. You've got a couple of the earth panels there, and then this bit sits completely moulded to the top of there. In order to get it to work with the Mega Drive 1, there's a plastic section here that pulls off. You can see it there, it just slots over the cartridge slot section, and then the profile of that is changed and allows you to plug it all the way into a Mega Drive 1. But that wasn't enough. As well as that, inside the box, there's two like metal pin plate things that have to rest up against these, and they have to fit and kind of prise the cartridge slot open to be able to fit and sit this in properly. And it's so rickety and so dodgy. I don't know how they got away with it through CE certification and things like that. It must have been a nightmare. So, whichever way you do it, it's a clusterfuck of an arrangement and not something I would have wanted to mess around with back in the day. I don't mind now so much, and it's a curiosity to kind of put all the different combinations out at events. But total nightmare as far as the design goes. It was nonsensical. So we'll just plug that back in. So what could they do? Right. Well, the Mega Drive obviously played Mega Drive cartridges, which typical affair would have looked a little like this. It's an EverDrive, obviously, but it would have looked a little like this. And obviously, it would play multi-region games. If you had any kind of restrictions in place, you could modify it. But generally speaking, you could use certain foreign games on a UK Mega Drive. The Mega CD, slightly different affair. It relies entirely on the Mega Drive for its operation. So all the processing is done on there, but all of the outputs are done through the Mega Drive. So the only thing this really is responsible for doing is processing the CD audio and the FMV and reading the discs itself. Now, it is region locked, but it's only region locked by its BIOS, and I'll explain a bit more about that when I get to it in a few minutes. But so, in theory, what you were able to play games from your own region and from other regions if you had some way of changing the BIOS on there. That wasn't particularly easy to do back in the day, but there is a way around it today. Then, of course, the 32X, again, it was a cartridge-based system, slightly different shaped cartridges for this. They did have a larger capacity, and, of course, they were 32-bit. Well, that was the way they phrased it. 32-bit games, which had, like, 3D, kind of 3D capabilities, like polygon processing. But there weren't too many games released for it. And then, like I say, there was a couple of games that were CD32X that relied on both pieces of hardware plugged in order to run. So that's what they were capable of. So using these today, right now, if you've got the money to be able to pick these up, and that's not going to be cheap. I mean, a Mega Drive, yeah, you can get a Mega Drive pretty cheap these days. You can probably get a Mega Drive for about 20-30 quid in decent condition. Boxed ones, 40-50 quid, something like that. That's not a problem. Anybody can pick up those, and there's millions out there. If you can find better, you know, the better the better. You know, that's the rule when it comes to those. Mega CDs. To get a Mega CD 1 in decent working order, you're going to be looking at £100 plus, I would say. You can find them cheaper occasionally, but in recent years the prices have creeped up. Mega CD 2s are a bit more common, and in theory they should be a bit more reliable because there's less to go wrong. You don't have a sliding drawer, you don't have touch panel controls, you've literally just got the console itself with a little LED access light on the front and a physical CD drawer access lid. That's all you've got there. There's nothing else going on with that. So, you know, that there's no major working parts besides the laser assembly. So yeah, so picking up one of those anywhere between probably £70 and about £130 for a decent one. Of course, you've got to make sure the edge connectors are nice and clean and not corroded, and then everything's working properly in there. The tricky part when it comes to this is usually the 32X. You can still get 32Xs, there's probably quite a few on eBay right now. The price of these has fluctuated massively as time's gone on and based on market demand. Like I say, when they first come out, they were anywhere between £150 and £200, fully boxed like that. As time went on, they couldn't shift them. Within a year, they were selling them for 50 quid, you know what I mean? That they just could not move them, and that was the only way to do it. There was some quite famous videos on the internet talking about, you know, just trying to get rid of these things. Before retro became, well, it entered its renaissance and people started collecting, you could get a 32X for pennies, basically. You could buy a shell like this for a couple of quid, a £5 or a tenner. However, without the bridging cable which links the 32X to the Megadrive, you were kind of stuffed. So, you know, you needed to be finding one that was ideally boxed, or at least, you know, had the accessories with it. So the little metal prongs if you need to fit it to the Megadrive 1, and definitely, obviously the power supply, they can replace those, but that bridging cable was kind of essential. And as far as the bridging cable goes, it's pretty straightforward on this. It's the same input and output on between the Megadrive and the 32X. However, if you had a Megadrive 1, I'll just open up the box and show you. If you had a Megadrive 1, come out your bugger. So inside here you can see there's two of these. These are the metal prongs that attached it. I don't know how or why they ever thought that would be a good design, but ridiculous. Yeah, there's two of those in there, and then the cable that bridges the two systems has got a break-off section like this. And this break-off section allows you to plug in, you can see like one end of the cable into there, which is the standard Megadrive 2 RCA out jack, and then the other end is for the Megadrive 1 RCA out. So you could use just the standard join there, or plug it into this and be able to plug your 32X into a Megadrive 1. So without these cables and without those pins, it's very difficult to be able to use this. And you could probably cobble one together yourself, but it's already a nightmare of cables. The other problem, of course, is even if you've got all the pieces of kit you need for these consoles, you've then got to plug it all in. Now, everyone knows what a nightmare it is for UK plugs. Our plugs are chunky and massive compared to, you know, Americans and the Japanese. And the power bricks for these systems, you know, Sega power bricks, this is the original one for the Mega CD. I mean, they're big, you know, they're not huge on the grand scale of things, on the scale of consoles. And at the time, if you had one of these in your wall socket, it didn't leave a lot of room for anything else around it, and the heat the generators quite a lot. And of course, I've got my plug bank over here, rather sensibly, my switched plug bank, switched surge protected plug bank. If you've got one of these in here, you can't put them side by side, they just fail on each other. so they're lethal. It's ridiculous. So, moving into the modern age, what's the best way to go about using these systems? Right, I've taken the sensible precaution straight away. Some clever soul. Modern power supplies are a lot more reliable, a lot more energy efficient, and a lot better built than they were back in the day. Plus, they're better than aging components anyway. So what I've done is, for this, I've purchased a 3-way power adapter. So we've got the single power plug there, a normal plug, which goes into there. Then we've got a quite small power brick, modern power brick, which delivers 3 amps of current at 10 volts, so that's sufficient to cover all of the systems. And then as we go down the cable, you'll see the end of the plug would naturally be, let's turn this off a sec while I do this. The end of the plug would naturally be that pin there, and then some bright spark has created a 3-way section here, which comes to there. You can see 3 cables coming out of there, and that delivers power to all 3 of the consoles at the back. So even though it's still a spider of wires, it certainly helps simplify the connection. It means you're only taking up one socket at the wall. So that's a big thing. It also doesn't create a lot of heat, doesn't create any kind of loud buzz or any kind of interference. So that is definitely the first solution. As far as picture goes, obviously using RCA outs or ideally RGB would be ideal. I haven't got any of my cables to hand. I accidentally picked up my my Saturn RCA cable by mistake. So what I've got to do is I've got to connect this using the standard RF. So we've got it coming out of the multi-out at the back, and it's just connected to the TV by RF. But I'll be honest, the picture for RF on a widescreen LCD, the picture is very stable and very good, so I'm quite impressed with it. There's some talk that the picture through the 32X actually lowers the quality of the Megadrive some more and changes some of the colour saturation. So I'm quite pleased that on this TV with the RF, at least with what I've been doing here, the picture quality isn't suffering a great deal. I'm sure, you know, there's people out there who they're very into their, you know, their kind of visual clarity, and they're a bit spoiled by, you know, modern age HDMI and everything. I don't care much for that, especially when it comes to retro consoles. And so, you know, the picture quality is adequate, everything's clear, I can see it, I can hear it, there's no major distortion. I'm quite happy with that. And then, as far as games go, right, so when it comes to games, you got a few options, right? Mega Drive games, common as muck, you can get them from anywhere. You know, you can get, you know, your standard Mega Drive games. You can get your kind of cartridge adjusted games, you know, like with the port pass-throughs and things like that for micro machines. They all work through the 32X's pass-through on the top of here. So with all of this arranged, you can keep the 32X plugged in. It will process the image through the 32X. It might change the image clarity slightly, but you can still play all your Mega Drive games through this. Sonic and Knuckles works, and all those games work. What won't work, region changing converters will not work through here. It doesn't have the necessary pinouts by default. And also the power base slash, you know, there's many names for it, but basically the master system converter also doesn't work through this. And it doesn't work because a couple of connections are missing to allow you to do that. You can actually modify the system to allow that to happen, but I haven't done it to mine. Also an interesting point, the 32X, it's sort of region locked, but not at the same time. So this is a PAL one, but when you actually look at the motherboard on it, they all carry an NTSC like motherboard kind of code. Now it decides the region based on the Mega Drive that it's plugged into. You do still have to modify both, but technically it's one board for all. And anybody who knows Mega Drive ROMs will know quite a lot of Mega Drive ROMs on a cartridge would contain all regions of the game on one cartridge, and there are ways to trick it to play the different region of the game on there. There was a trick back in the day where you could take the UK Revenge of Shinobi, rip it out of the system. I know you weren't supposed to do that. Rip it out of the system while it was playing, plug it back in, hit the reset button, and it would load the Japanese version of the game, which was called the Super Shinobi. The music was slightly different and things like that. There's little tricks like that you can do. The 32X does it in a slightly different way, but some of the games had all regions on, some games didn't. There was a game called Calibri, which I think is a world ROM, so that would load on any 32X, connected to any Mega Drive anywhere in the world. But then you got other games like Knuckles Chaotix, which were region modded. So yeah, the 32X, yeah, Kev's just raised, sorry, I'm checking the text on here. The 32X doesn't work with all Mega Drives. The Mega Drive had some funky variations. There was the Multi-Mega, which was the one that was a Mega Drive and Mega CD combined into a small portable unit. I'd love to get one of those, and it does work, I think, with the British Multi-Mega, but it doesn't work with the CDX, which I think is the American one. It's kind of funky like that. It also doesn't work with the American-only Mega Drive 3 without extensive modding. It doesn't work with the Sega Nomad. People have done it online with some really funky hacks, but it takes a lot of modification to make that work. And of course, its own power supply. So it's not a kind of for-all, edition. It was really designed. It was designed and built to go with this exact setup. And you can tell by the way it all sits together that was the case. So yeah, the games, there were only ever about, I think, 40 games in all released for the 32X. And those, of course, came on cartridge. They were slightly different shaped. I literally don't own any of them. The price of the console I was talking about has fluctuated massively. And to pick up a 32X now, the time I bought it a couple of years ago, this cost me about £100, right? The price has dipped since then, and it's gone up again since then. A 32X now, I mean, if I've got any of my trader friends on here, they can probably tell you the current value, and it depends who you're kind of aiming it at, but you can pay anything up to 200 quid for a 32X now, so it's not cheap, and you've got to make sure you've got the cables and everything with it. And then if you've got to buy the extras like I was talking about, like the better aerial lead, and you've got to buy the 3-way plug, I think the 3-way adapter for this was about 30 quid, but it's worth doing for the sake of what you're doing. But then there are ways to save money when it comes to actually gaming. So, straight away, the EverDrive, right? I talked about the EverDrive the other day. The EverDrive MD is for the Mega Drive. You can put your Mega Drive ROMs on here. They play just fine. You can even put your Master System ROMs on here, which is what this little button is here. It acts as the pause button for Master System, just as you would have found on the Master System or on the Master System converter for the Mega Drive. So you can plug that straight into a Mega Drive. You can play your Master System games. You can play your Mega Drive games. There are even people now who've converted Game Gear ROMs, which you can trick your Mega Drive into playing through your Mega Drive, but there's only a few being converted and the compatibility is a bit flaky at the moment. So the good news is this does work through the 32X. So we can plug that in there, we can play our Mega Drive games. However, because of restrictions in the 32X, we can't play our Master System games, even using this through the 32X, unless we were to mod the 32X. But what it can do, rather conveniently, is it does serve also as a flash card for the 32X. So not only is it a flash card for the Mega Drive and technically for the Master System, and in a roundabout way for the Game Gear, it's also a flash card for the 32X. So rather than spending, and I mean the games for 32X, if you can find them, especially PAL, there are not many made, you're going to be looking at probably £40 to £80 for the average game. For things like Knuckles Chaotix, which is kind of the flagship game for the system, it was the only official Sonic game that the system got. you're going to be looking up to £150 plus. You know, it really is stupid money for the games, and in my opinion, not even worth it. So, you know, to have the EverDrive there with only 40 games available, it'd be a great system to collect for. But much like collecting for the Neo Geo, there's, you know, the library's not huge, but the kind of costs involved, yeah, they're ridiculous, Andy. You know, they're ridiculous. But with the EverDrive, you can put all your ROMs on here and you can play it. So, you know, the argument I was making the other day about EverDrives and flash carts in ways of preservation, this cart in here completely opens this system up. Games you wouldn't otherwise be able to get for this system, and certainly haven't been released on any kind of, you know, virtual console or anything like that, you can play natively on here the way they were meant to be played through the original hardware, which is just awesome. Now, the EverDrive has one more function. The Mega CD2, well, the Mega CD in general, as I mentioned, is not actually region locked in hardware. It has an internal save battery backup, which is long dead now. You could also get a RAM cart for the Mega Drive, which you could back up your games to from the Mega CD. Those things are hard to come by. However, the Mega CD was only region locked by its actual BIOS. So it has its own BIOS screen, and it decides the region of your disc purely based on the BIOS that's programmed into it. Now, two good things about that. The Mega CD, as you'll see from the stack that I'm rocking here, and what I've got already inside there, it has no copy protection whatsoever. So burning your own games, again, is not a problem. Mega CD games aren't particularly expensive anyway, but like I say, when the lasers fail on these, I've heard rumour that they can damage your games and everything. So, you know, it makes sense for the sake of things like events, like I was talking about before, to use, you know, backups, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. And it runs them without any kind of problem. It also means that potentially, if I want to play original foreign games, or, you know, I want to play foreign copy games, as long as I could get around the BIOS issue, I should be able to play them on here. Now, there is no way at the moment, may I add, although they are working on it, to be able to play Mega CD games through the EverDrive. That is a problem. Everybody has been asking Crix to add it, but it's not possible at the moment. Everybody would love to be able to play Mega CD games, you know, through the EverDrive that way, but it's just not possible at the moment. However, what you can do is the EverDrive can be used as a backup RAM cart, so you can save your save games for these games onto here and keep them permanently without any kind of battery backup, because it's saved to flash memory, not to a battery backup kind of ROM chip. And you can also change the BIOS region of the Mega CD by if you've got access to the BIOS files straight from the EverDrive itself. So if you do want to burn, because like not all games are released in PAL region for the Mega CD, I have got the full Mega CD set somewhere, but if you want to be able to play certain other versions of it, as long as you've got the BIOS file on there, you can actually set up your EverDrive to load the foreign BIOS. You can then put your game into there, and because it thinks that the BIOS that's being run is the one from that region, it will play that game. There may be problems with some of them because it is still outputting 50 Hertz. You do have to mod it to be able to output 60 Hertz. So you may get a few, you know, visual errors, but technically you can play the game, which is really cool. Yeah, exactly, Kev, exactly. So, you know, there's a lot of things you can do. So, you know, gaming on this in the modern age is pretty awesome, because things like that have really, really opened out the possibilities for the system. And although it's a big, ugly kind of transformer looking thing with all those things plugged into it, it's quite, you know, visually impressive to look at the same time. And when you've got the complete set, it's like you've just you've built your own Megazord like I was talking about, and I think it's really cool to do. Now, we can turn it on now. We're going to take a look at... I know I've been talking a lot, guys, but we're going to take a look at a few of the games now, of course. I'm not just going to leave you hanging and just talk crap about it and then not actually show you what it's all about. So, we'll fire it up now, and I'll switch the camera up to look at the screen. And I'll grab my controller, and we'll take a look at some of the games. So we'll take a look at the EverDrive's functionality first, and then go into a couple of things. So starting when it's all hooked up like this, starting the console with a cartridge plugged into the 32X or just a Mega Drive, if it's just a Mega Drive or Mega CD, will load whatever game's on that cartridge. If you want to load the Mega CD side, you have to take that cartridge out, and then it will load up to that. But because we've got the EverDrive in, if we want to load the Mega CD, we can actually boot it with the EverDrive in. We can load the BIOS first from the EverDrive, and it will basically start the Mega CD side of it, and then we can put our disc in and launch the disc. So, but what I'm going to do is start off with, we'll show you how the EverDrive works for this. So, let's turn it on. And like I say, this is only connected through RF, and you'll notice the picture, okay, like it reduces the kind of quality looking at it through a camera on here, but the picture quality here is as good as anything I see through RCA normally, even as good, nearly as good as some RGB SCART cables. So we go in, I've got my ROMs categorised. You'll see I've got a Master System ROMs, which obviously I can't show you without unplugging the 32X, but take my word for it, it does play Master System ROMs just fine when it's just going to the Mega Drive. Then we've got our Mega Drive ROMs. Now the Mega Drive ROMs I haven't actually separated into categories for the different regions. Like I say, the reason being most Mega Drive ROMs have all regions, or the ones that you can find online, have all regions of the game built into one file, and then the console automatically selects and determines which version you're playing. However, there is a feature on here where if we press this button and go to options, we can actually decide what region we want to try and launch. So I could, in theory, try and launch I'm on Chuck Rock 2 at the moment. I could try and launch the Japanese version on here. It may work, it may not. If the game was originally region locked, it would say you're using a PAL system, we can't launch that. But some of the earlier games, things like Revenge of Shinobi, in theory, if you've got Mega Key on and you change the game region, in theory you should be able to launch the foreign version of it on this console. Won't be without problems. We said it'll probably be slower, but you know the possibilities there. So it's quite a cool little feature. However, that's not the case. So we'll just pick a random game here, and we will go with one of my personal all-time favourite games. I absolutely love the game. We'll go with Golden Axe. So you can see by default there it's trying to launch the American ROM. And you should be able to tell from the sound that is indeed the American ROM that is being played. The reason being, it's playing at the speed you're probably used to hearing now at events and maybe on the arcade Megatech or seen on videos. The British version, the music is a lot slower. So it's nice to be able to play this at proper speed on a British, Mega Drive. And obviously the game just runs exactly as it should, Interesting fact, by the way, not everyone's aware of it, but this was an awesome port of, one of Sega's best arcade games, and this was always an awesome port for the Mega Drive with an extra level, which I thought was brilliant, and the dual mode. But the colours are very bright and made very home friendly. Well, somebody's actually released a patched version of this game, which they've changed the colours out, and the colours are a bit more washed out and a bit more graded, so it's closer to the colours of the arcade game. Oh, what a situation to be trapped in! Look at that. So you can actually get versions of the ROMs which correct the colours to be like more like the arcade, which I think is pretty awesome. So that of course is a Mega Drive game. We'll hit reset. I've set it up on this EverDrive that when you hit reset, it just goes back to the game that you've already preloaded. Even if you turn that off and you have it go back to the EverDrive menu when you hit reset, if you hit start again, it will launch the last game that you flashed to the RAM on the EverDrive cart. So I've just pressed start there and it's just loading Golden Axe straight back up. So we'll go back to it now anyway. So that's what it's like when it comes to launching Mega Drive games. The good news is as well, and I've talked about this as far as systems go, and people have seen this at events, any kind of homebrew or hacks or modifications or, you know, things with trainers or something put in there, you can actually run those on original hardware using EverDrive. That's awesome for things like, I've showed it before, but I'm going to show it again because I just think it's a fucking brilliant game. And you can see the ROM size there. No game's ever that big, 4 megabit, and it's Sonic Classic Heroes. Basically, this game is the kind of the pinnacle of Sonic gaming. I think it's all 3, or just it might be Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 actually. Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles as a complete game. And instead of just 2 characters, you can have 3 characters in your team. So you'd have Sonic, Knuckles and Tails, and you can choose to pick any of them with the powers that they've got, like climbing walls. You can also be the characters from Knuckles Chaotix, Vector the Crocodile, Charmy Bee I think it is, and whoever the Armadillo is. You can be those as an optional team. It's also got level select built in. You can get all the Chaos Emeralds, all the bonus stages, and when it loads up, it should load up. Now that's interesting. That should have loaded. So whether that game doesn't work through the 32X or not, I don't know. I might need to take the 32X out to actually have that on work properly, but I can assure you that ROM usually does work anyway. So there's something I've just discovered. So I won't be able to show that game, so I'm not going through the rigmarole of unplugging everything at the back, but trust me, it's an awesome game. So if I now want to play a Mega CD game, I can quite simply just power this off, pop out the EverDrive cartridge, turn the console back on, and it should load. There you go, the Mega CD BIOS at this point. Tell me there to close the CD drawer because I've got nothing in. I think we can hit start from there and it'll go to a CD player if you've got an audio CD in, but besides that, we'll take our game. This is the PAL version of Sonic CD, the best, or one of the best Sonic games anyway. Pop that in. It's not an especially loud drive. I've heard louder CD-based systems. I haven't, Kev, no. Xeno Crisis? Not something I'm familiar with. I'll have to look that one up. The Chaotix characters are cool, right? Yeah, I've seen the modded version, Andy, of Bare Knuckle 3. Well, Streets of Rage treated more like Bare Knuckle 3. And of course, obviously the Mega CD, the one thing it was famous for was its FMV and its CD sound. And this being the British one has got the better track, I would argue. Cool. The reason I say that is the Japanese version and the American version, I think, use a completely different audio track there. And there's a lot of debate online over which is the best audio track. I prefer that one, not because I remember it fondly, but I've compared them all, and I still think that's the best one. This is a superb game. The remake that was done in recent years by Christian Whitehead for, I think it was PS3, Xbox 360 and mobile devices, was a brilliant port, but there's nothing quite like the original. You know, they'd redrawn all the starting animation and changed the music to have no lyrics. Wasn't quite the same, you know. This was a really cool game. When you hear the backstory of how Sonic CD came about, it's very interesting because originally it would have been Sonic 2. And when you start looking at the production of the two games, Sonic 2 and Sonic CD, it was the result of a split of two production companies. And originally their ideas were kind of paired, and then the ideas were split into what became Sonic 2 and Sonic CD. It's basically Sega of America and Sega of Japan having a bit of a lover's tiff, I think, and a bit of dick measuring to show who was better. And in the end, you got two fantastic games, but of course Sonic 2 got the world renowned because it's released on Megadrive, and Sonic CD being limited to only those people who could afford one. You can hear the CD audio here with this kind of rave music at the background. Of course, the Mega Drive never actually been able to do, you know, like Nintendo's Mode 7 very well. The Mega CD actually helped that a little bit. The CD audio sound helped. You know, it made for an awesome game with this. So, let's have a quick blast through level 1. Or whatever it is I've saved to. I've probably only saved level 1 to be honest, but... Oh no, it has actually saved my game from before. That's good. Amy following me. Throw out those spikes. Of course, the mechanic in this being the time travel thing. So if you hit those posts which say past or future at high speed, you move between the past and the future, and you have to find certain... If I run fast enough, I should warp in time. If I can get enough speed up before I... No, it's expired. Yeah, you have to kind of move through time. Didn't really run for long enough then, else I would have got that. And you have to find certain things and break them, and that allows you to complete the level properly. This is the first game where he actually got his peel out move added in as well, if I can find level ground to show you. So you got your kind of ground spin, which does a single, rather than being a distorted animation, you've got a circular animation. And then you've got the peel out move, which is faster, but of course you're not protected, and that looks like that. And it gives you a much faster launch off. So this is the first game to show the peel out. See if we can get into the future at least. Maybe not. You can't see. You got to find enough room to kind of get up to speed, which is difficult. Oh, you won't get it here. There you go. And that warps us into the future because that was the last post we hit. There's a past version and a past, present, and two different future versions depending on what you've done in the past. But it does make the levels extremely confusing if you don't know what you're doing. That's probably why I got stuck on this level, because it's such a damn maze. It's so hard to do. But what's good news about that is that the system has actually saved my game on there. I haven't got the Everdrive cart in, so it has actually held my save for that game on the system. It's never been replaced, so done quite well there. So anyway, so that's a typical Mega CD game. But you can actually see that if I now, I'm going to take the game out, and I'm going to pop the EverDrive back in. And what we're going to do this time, it will go to the EverDrive cart because I've now got the EverDrive cartridge plugged in. And if I go to this folder, Mega CD BIOS files, you saw what the BIOS screen looked like before. I can now select any version of any BIOS that I want and load it up. And from what I haven't actually tried this yet, but apparently you can load the BIOS from the special Iowa. It was like a portable ghetto blaster that had Mega CD functionality, which was really strange, and it had its own BIOS screen. The JVC Wonder Mega and the multi-mega BIOSes as well, and you can see the American versions of Sega CD1, Sega CD2, because it was called Sega CD in America. We can load up any of those BIOSes. I'll just quickly show you that actually. We'll go with the American Sega CD2 BIOS, 14th of March 93. There we go. There's an NTSC compatible Sega CD for use in NTSC regions other than Japan and Southeast Asia. So we can't actually load that one. But let's try one of the others. Now I know there's actually you can get a D region BIOS as well. It's like a world BIOS that you can get, but I haven't actually got that on here. So let's just try launching the Iowa one. See if this works. It may do, it may not. No. Like I say, I heard it was a rumour. It was a rumour. But I'd heard it had worked. But I should at least be able to change the BIOS for the earlier Mega CD1 BIOS for Europe, and also the multi-mega. So let's just try that. So we'll try and load the multi-mega BIOS. There you go. So you can see the region versions changed in the corner. Nothing much changed there. I think the disc colour there is slightly different for it, but that's about it. I think the Mega CD1 BIOS is very different, so we'll just quickly load that up so we can show you the bigger change. If it's going to work. It may do, it may not. Ooh, I have only just downloaded these BIOS files, so I might have a bad dump here. Should have really prepped a little bit better for this video, I think. But yeah, it definitely changed it just anyway. You saw that it loaded that one. Let's just see if we can get one more to work at least. Let's try and get... let's try and load the Wonder Mega. May work, it may not. Let's give it a try. No, it's giving the same error. Not to worry, but just to show you that obviously you can change the region, and if you do region mod, obviously your Mega CD, you can change it to trick that. There, like I say, there is a universal world BIOS now that's been created that allows you to de-region it through software, but I've not been able to download that as of yet. I've only just recently broken all this back out. I haven't had it out for a little while, so I'm just kind of showing you this blind, if you know what I mean. So anyway, the Mega CD, interesting system. What it became more famous for, unfortunately, was some rather shitty games, and by that I mean they were talking about FMV being the future. I don't believe, you know, everybody thought it would be. You know, there were some awesome games for the system. It had like great ports of Final Fight, you can see there, brilliant game. It had some great unique games like KO Flying Squadron. It had some iconic games like Night Trap, which was one of the games that sparked off the whole ESRB rating system, because they were saying that games were getting too real. And of course, like I say, there were some games that were released that were not just Mega CD, but were CD32X games. This is actually the CD32X version. It differs from the original in that you've got larger screens on there, so I'll try and show you that in a minute, just to compare. We've also got the awesome Snatcher, and again, to buy this game is very expensive for Mega CD, so I've managed to do a burn of it. That's like a horror kind of RPG, crime kind of game. It's quite cool. You've got, and again, another good original game, Solfease, a brilliant space shooter for the system. And then you've got a couple of FMV games like Cobra Command, Night Trap I've already mentioned. I'm not sure about Thunderhawk, and Corpse Killer. Now I'm going to quickly show you that, just to show you what typical kind of Mega CD fare is like. And this is why the Mega CD didn't do too well. You know, Sonic CD, awesome game. A couple of original titles there I just mentioned, awesome games. And then unfortunately you had things like this, which came to kind of epitomise the Mega CD and why the system was a bit of a bomb. And like I say, again, this came as an original Mega CD game, but then you have this version as well, which is the CD32X game. And the video quality is a lot better than the standard 32X, sorry, the standard Mega CD video was, although it's still not quite as good as the video on the 3DO, because a lot of these games were ported to 3DO as well. And on 3DO, the video looked a lot clearer and a lot better, actually had a bigger palette and more on-screen colours possible. But this is a lot smoother than some Mega CDs I've seen. You know, some Mega CDs skip quite badly because the disc's on its way out. And of course, as the disc gets scratched, that can get even worse. But the animation's a bit smoother on this because this is the CD32X version. But yeah, that effect there, that crappy zombie, let that kind of set a standard as to what you're going to see. So, we'll get into the game. Yes, okay. Telling me that because I don't have a save game on there. It's not recognising any kind of save game. So you get this kind of crappy FMV intro. And then, when he gets into the game, it's basically an on-rails shooter. You got this scrolling background, and then these zombies just randomly, these cardboard cut-out zombies just kind of come launching at your camera. It's terrible. It's not good, put it that way. Should I go as far as to say it's terrible? Yes, probably. The cursor moves too quick. You can't really see what's going on with the bullets. You can't always tell if you're hitting the things. The cursor doesn't really separate itself from the background enough. And the enemies just come flying at you randomly. They might as well... There's no consistency. It just looks dreadful. And unfortunately, these are the kind of games that came to be iconic with the system, you know. They were synonymous with it, and it let the system down badly. And you know, it was impressive to see video like this on a 16-bit console, on any console back in the day, but I quite like so the thing is, Andy, even though, you know, those games were basic, things like Dragon's Lair, Road Avenger, where you literally just had to make decisions, I quite liked those games. But then ones where it didn't even rely on reflexes, things like Night Trap, where you just had to press the button at just the right time in the video, and it didn't really look like you were doing anything. Or things like this, you know, they've tried to make it more interactive, and they've made it just shit, basically. It's just unplayable rubbish. You're just watching a crap movie. So anyway, that's Corpse Killer CD32X. So yeah, rubbish. So yeah, that's enough Mega CD for tonight, I think. That's about all I can stomach right now. Yeah, Night Trap was terrible. So that's the Mega CD. So I suppose the last thing to show you really is, you know, the most advanced side of this system, which is the 32X. So we'll pop the Everdrive back in, fire it back up, and we'll check out a couple of 32X games. So I did, up until recently, only have the I've got them listed as US ROMs. There's actually a combination on here of US, world, and Japanese ROMs, because I'd categorise them all into one set, like my Mega Drive collection, because I believed that I was under the misunderstanding that I'd had all regions involved in one ROM, and that's not the case. So when you actually try and load one of these ROMs that's for the wrong region, try and do it now. This, I could be wrong, this might actually be a PAL ROM, but we'll see. It says EU PAL at the top, but I think this is either, this might be a bad dump, or this might be the foreign ROM and it's just listing it wrong. But it's going to try and write. It takes a little bit longer to write it because the game sizes are a lot bigger than the Mega Drive ones. But yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the Doom on this list doesn't actually work. Okay, so I have actually put the PAL one in this section. There we go. So yeah, might as well show you this while I'm at it. Yeah, pretty good port of Doom, I'll be honest. Music sucks. Let's be honest about it. The music capabilities on the 32X weren't fantastic. Tries its best to be atmospheric, but the animation's pretty good. The controls are pretty slick. And we'll just play through level 1 to show you. Some graphics effects are missing. That is supposed to be like a green moving floor on the original Doom. There's a few textures missing from the walls because it can only show so many. There's posts missing out of this room because it didn't have the memory to display them. I'm sure some Doom experts out there will be able to tell you better than me exactly what's missing from these stages. But you know, for all intents and purposes, at the time there weren't that many options for playing Doom on console, and this is one of the better ones, I would say. I'll find the right way to go now. Through the door, is it? Is that the way I came in? That's the way I came in, isn't it? Oh, down the corridor there. See, because there's not many textures on the walls, it was a little bit ambiguous there. But... die. Collect some clips. Some armour. Die. Die. Rookie mistake there. You know, it moves at a fair old pace. The music sucks, but you know, it moves at a decent pace. It controls pretty well with the Mega Drive pad. You've got like B to fire. I think A swaps your weapons, and then if you hold C opens doors, but it also sets you into strafe mode, so you can strafe left and right. It takes a little getting used to during heavy combat, but you know, it's there and it does kind of work. So. It is, Kev, you know, like I say, The SNES version was okay, but it struggled with scaling the image up. You know, they've reduced the image size on this slightly to be able to get that better speed, but it doesn't detract from the game. It's still very immersive because, you know, at the time we didn't have first-person games, full stop, you know. And, you know, Doom was like... I know we had Wolfenstein before it, but that didn't see many home console ports. And obviously Doom was the first one to start getting them, and it was way above what a lot of consoles were capable of. Of course, the Jaguar version being the best, and then of course, the PlayStation version came not long after and blew everything away. You know, almost as good as the PC version, I would say. Not everyone would agree with me on that, but that's what I think anyway. Need some ammo. Could do some new guns as well. There wants to be a shotgun around here somewhere before I die. Red key card. I'm getting a bit too into this now. I might be playing this all night. Do love a bit of Doom, me. Oh, what if I was going the right way there? Oh, someone's coming for me. I need another weapon, man. Where's the guns? I need a shotgun is what I need. Desperately. I'm picking up the ammo, but I'm not picking up the weapons. And I'm dead. Anyway. So that's Doom anyway. And I will go to the other list this time, which I know is all PAL games. And we'll show a couple of other things off that kind of show off the system. This was the flagship game for the 32X, Knuckles Chaotix. It was the only true Sonic game that it got. Early prototypes had... Sonic's not even in it, that's the weird thing. The early prototype had Sonic and Tails in it. And then as they modified the game further, they changed it and they made Knuckles the main character, who's my favourite Sonic character anyway. You know, they added in a couple of extra characters and a really strange gameplay mechanic where you're bound by magic rings, which is quite funky, to be honest. And you can see, you know, it's obviously doing some cool new effects. Oh, and it's frozen, so it looks like I might have a bit of a bad dump there. That was working fine earlier. Just check I've got a good connection on this. Like I say, not had a chance to test these at length like I normally do. Let's try that again. See if it loads fine this time. No save. Yeah, that'll do. Music sounds off as well. I think I've got a bad dump here. Music's supposed to be a lot better than this, by the way. Yeah, so with this one, once you find your partner, you're bound by the rings that you've got. So now you're kind of, it's like an elastic band that you've got bonding you. And you can use each other to kind of hit enemies, to collect items. And do various things. And like you were saying, Andy, buying this game is super expensive. So to be able to play it, you know, at least using the... there you go, it's frozen again. Yeah, I think I've got a bad dump there. But anyway, to buy it is super expensive. So to be able to play it on here is pretty cool. I'll have to go back through my ROMs and just double check I haven't got any duffers on there. Got a few bad ROMs on there, but I know there's others that work just fine. I think Virtual Racing works just fine. So let this load up. This obviously showing off some of the polygon processing of the system when it loads. Does take quite a while to load the 32X games into memory. Today, people. Sega. So slightly clearer audio, speech audio than you would have got on, you know, Megadrive games. Oh, don't tell me this one's messing up as well. I think I've got some bad ROM dumps here. Well, that's a shame. I'll have to double check all that a bit later on. But anyway, so, you know, that was the... I'm going to sign off now. I just realised how long I've been. So that was the Mega Drive, Mega CD and 32X. And yeah, so summing it all up, I think they're all awesome systems. They're a great set to get if you're a collector, you know, get them all together, you know, enjoy all three, you know, take a bite of each and use some of the cool features, you know, use the EverDrive and open up these things like messing around with the BIOSes, you know, launching, you know, using it as a backup cart, being able to not have to buy super expensive 32X games, you know, use it for all those things. I'd definitely recommend if you are going to pick them up that you try and find a package deal on them, but don't let anybody fleece you trying to argue, oh look, we've got them all in one place kind of thing. Try and find the best deal that you can, get the best of each, and they shouldn't let you down. And do yourself a favour, buy one of those three-way power bricks, because it's going to save you a world of hassle when it comes to hooking these things up. Get yourself a nice, decent RGB SCART cable if you want the best picture. Sort yourself out a few backups if you want to just try some of the Mega CD games first. But yeah, collecting for these systems is well established now. You'll be able to find Mega CD games quite a lot of places. Mega Drive games are everywhere and they're in good condition. 32X games, it's a bit more of a niche thing. If you can afford it, by all means collect. If you can't, there's an avenue to playing those on there at least. So, but yeah, big Sega lover, big fan of it all. And I guess that's about it for this video. I'm going to be doing another couple of videos soon. We're going to be covering the Master System with one of the other YamYams in an upcoming video. I'm still yet to do some of my other videos, such as my Retro Gaming Room 101. I will come to that, but that's something I need to do with somebody else. And I'm obviously we're going to be pushing very soon the next Revival mini event, Revival Zapped, Winter Zapped, coming up at the end of November. I recommend you go onto the Revival Retro Events page and check that out. Come along, have a pint with us, enjoy a game with us, and be able to play some of these cool systems I've been showing you the last few weeks. There's going to be a lot more videos coming up. I've got lots and lots of systems to cover. I'll probably go in depth on a few more games, but I'm going to keep the quality the same. I'm going to keep it guerrilla style. I'm going to show it you as I'm dealing with it, and at least then you're getting the real experience. You're getting to know how I experience retro gaming now, and just hear a few of my thoughts on it all anyway. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying the videos. Go back and check out some of my other videos, please do. I will be referring back to them a lot because I'm trying to lead one video onto another. And keep following the page to be alerted when a new live stream comes up. But take it easy anyway, enjoy the rest of your evening. and I probably won't be back before the weekend, so have a good one.